Hey everybody, it's Deborah. I have another watercolor project for us today. We're going to be painting Plentiful plums. Yes, I have a tree full of them, so I just plucked off a few with some of their beautiful leaves. And this is the project we're going to be working on today. I will be showing you some colors that I chose to use in this video, and I hope that you will like and subscribe to my channel. So let's get started. Starting our Plentiful plums layout today, here is my handout, and I've already traced that onto my watercolor paper. So let's talk a little bit about what colors we will be using in this project. So I have my combo of colors, and this plum is a little bit less yellow, but I'm still going to add a little yellow in here. I'm going to be trying to remember to leave these little highlights on here. So I'm going to paint around them with my yellow. And I'm going to go into my transparent orange. Pulling that around. Getting a little water to just soften that edge over to the leaf. And I'm working this all wet. I want it to stay wet as I work my way around. I am once again using the Arches Bright White 140-pound cold pressed paper. So now I want to go into my rose madder and start dropping that on the outside edges. And it's also fairly dark back here. And we'll have to put our little seam in later after it's dried. Trying to darken up this bottom edge just a little bit more. You could also use some masking fluid to keep these highlights, but I do find that it makes them sometimes a little too hard. A little too hard-edged, I should say. So now I want to take some of my mixture of Alizarin and Magenta and put that around the shadow edge. And again, everything's pretty wet here, so it's all flowing nicely together. And we may be doing a little bit of glazing here later to deepen the color. So now I can take a damp brush and work at blending those colors. And there's quite a bit of paint on here, so you can always lift a little, and then I can charge in a little bit more pigment to make sure it doesn't get too washed out. It's pretty dark right under here as well. And we'll just see how that dries. I'm going to just soften a little bit around these highlights. And we'll let that dry. And keeping an eye on it, make sure it's not getting any blooms. Now I'm going to take some of my transparent orange. Now if you don't have these colors, you can substitute whatever you might have that will work as well, like a cadmium orange. I'm actually going to take this orange and just kind of make a few little drops of that in here because there's a little bit of texture on that edge of the plum. And then I'm going into my rose madder. And I don't want to paint over my little highlights, so working my way around that and blending those colors with some water. You always want to make sure you don't let anything dry, that you get a hard edge. Just coming around to the other half. I'm going to change the shape of that a little bit. Still working with that rose madder. But I'll be bringing in the darker color that I used up here, the Alizarin and Magenta. I'll just take a little water and soften those colors together. And again, these are all wet as I work my way around. I'm going to drop a little more of my orange in here. And I didn't put any yellow, but I think I'll drop a little of my cadmium-free yellow in here. Again, I'm kind of getting a little bit of texture that way, which I think really works in this instance, so I'm happy with that. It's a little darker on these two edges, so I'm using that richer color. And this third plum is pretty light in comparison, so I'm taking some of that cad yellow. So I have the lemon out, but I haven't really used much of that or any of that at this point. I'm probably gonna just use the yellow. I'm going to go to this side. I get a little hair. Get out. In fact, I'm going to use a little of my green gold at this point. Just dropping a little into my yellow here. And going into my orange. all the way around this edge as well. And I think here I'll just use a little water to blend the colors that I have down at this point and bring that around this way. And I don't want this to dry. And I'm going to go back to my rose madder and drop that around the edges. It's pretty dark up here, so we'll be using some of that deeper color here as well. They're pretty close there. I'm not letting them touch for fear they will pick up the color from each other. I think I'm getting a little bit of a bloom here, and I believe it's wet enough, so I'm just going to take a damp brush and just very gently move that color back to the edge like that. A little more of the rose madder here. Comes down through the center and at the bottom. I'm going into that deeper mixture, dropping that around the edges. And at the bottom here, there's a little bit up the top. I'm going to take some water and I'm going to lift a little in here because this area is pretty light, and actually over on this edge as well. I can get a little highlight that way. And I'm going to come down here as well. I'm going to drop just a little bit more of that green gold in here. Again, I'm just kind of stippling it in. Get a little bit of texture. And maybe I'll actually drop a little bit of yellow in as well. A little more lifting. And I'm going to drop some of the yellow right in here because it's getting a little too dull looking. And just a little more of that deeper color. Just charging that in right on the edge and right at the bottom here. Now we can start working on some of our leaves. So I'm going to start with some of my Sap Green. Pulling that over to that center vein, and I'm going to be leaving a little space there. Now I can go into that deeper mixture and just charge some of that in to the base of that leaf. And then with some water, I'm just going to move some of this paint up towards the edge and maybe drop a little bit of green gold up at the top here. Maybe just a little bit more of the deeper color. Now I can work on the other half of that same leaf, and I'm going to start with that deeper color. So that's the ultramarine, and a little bit of hookers and some green gold. And then I'm going to go into my sap green. So you see I'm leaving that vein down the center white for the time being. And I will use my green gold once again at the bottom of this leaf. Looks good. Just going to fix that a little there, and so. One of the things I wanted to show you while this is still wet is if you want to bring some veins into the leaf, you can use a chopstick or any stick really that you might have. And you want to be fairly careful with it. It's going to be basically scarring the paper. And it will also pick up some of your paint color, so you might be moving that around as well. But that's kind of a simple approach to adding veins to your leaves. So we can move over to this smaller leaf, and I am going to start again with my green gold just at the base here, going into my sap. And a little darker at the edge here. So again, I'll take a damp brush and maybe lift a little. And then go back in to the other half. So you can see I'm varying my placement of the lightest colors against the darkest colors. And there is a little highlight on this edge. So I'm going to be needing a little more of my sap green. Let's just drop that in here. And I want to go back to my green gold on this outside edge. And then back to this deepest color. So that's quite a bit of color on there and moisture. So again, I'm taking just a damp brush, moving that around and actually lifting a little bit of it. And again, I can take my stick. And you do want to get to these leaves with your stick while they're still wet. Otherwise, this is not going to show at all. So, I think we can work on this one because it looks like this edge is dry. I'm going to, again, start with my green gold. I'll start on this side. Into my sap. And I'm going to need just a little bit of my deeper color just right in here. And I want to, again, keep an eye on this. It's starting to dry. And so I'm back to my sap. So the point here is to just keep everything moving. So you can get some wonderful gradations and blending with your colors. I'm going into the lighter green, green gold. And then I'm going to get back to that deeper color towards the tip here. So I like doing leaves this way. It gives you some time to work one side and kind of take a breath before you have to get to the other half. I can go to the other side now, and it's a little lighter right here by my plum. Trying to get a little of the serration on the edges of my leaves. I'm going to use a little of the sap. And I need to mix a little bit more of my deeper color. And I want to get that in here along that vein. Now I haven't gotten to my, what can also happen is they will lift the paint. So it can be a surprise. Using again the darker color here. A little highlight at this edge here, but then I'm going to bring in the sap green. And I've got to blend a little bit better down this edge here. So I'm taking more of my deep color and dropping it in towards that center. But I think I'll lift just a little bit of that. And then I want to get that stick. Now I can see, that these are starting to dry, and they're probably going to need a little bit of glazing, but hopefully not too much. And I did drop a little paint onto my paper here, and I'll show you how to lift that. So I do want to work on these other leaves, so I'm going to turn my paper. I think I'll turn it all the way around so I can go ahead and finish this one. And I'm going to start with the deep color here. Need a little more blue in that, a little more ultramarine. So I do want to make sure this is dry before I start painting right up against it. And it looks dry, so that seemed to work. And then I'll go into the Sap Green. And I think for the rest of it, I'm going to use my green gold. So I'm going to start it right here. And then I'm just kind of working those colors together. And I can also lift a little. And now I can take my stick and now I'll work on the other half. So I'm going into the deep color just right here. But then I want to get into that sap green. And then I will do the, oops, I just want to get this right here. Green gold. I need a little more. And again, I'm working that together. And I'll take the stick and I'll move the painting so I can access this leaf here. Going directly to my darker color. Feeling like that could be just a little deeper, I put some more blue into that. And getting some of the sap. And I think over here I'll do the green gold. I'm using a brush with a very nice tip. This is an 8 Royal and Langnickel brush. And that dark color can come right up to the edge of our plum here. And I did add a little bit more of the blue. And what I like about that ultramarine is the way it granulates. It gives a little texture. You can see it a little bit in the other leaves here. And then we can do the other half of that leaf. I'm starting again with that deeper color. I'm needing a little bit more of my sap, which I'm going to just lift some of this out. Before I continue, I want to get my veins in there. So I'm going in for some of my sap green here. And now some green gold on the bottom edge of this leaf. I think I'll just drop a little of the deeper color right on there and take my stick and get those veins in here. Now just one more leaf. So I'm going to start with my sap. Now I made a little edge here where it touches that plum. Oops, I got into my vein. So I can just blot that with some dry paper towel and then drop a little more color in against that. If you get it right away, it should pretty much lift. Now I want the green gold. And the deeper combination, which I need a little more of. And I want to take that behind my plum here, so using that nice sharp point to draw basically with my paint around that plum, and then getting it a little deeper here for the sense of a shadow. And I'm going back to my sap. So you can see I just work all my colors into each leaf. And I'm not around this other side, it's a little darker. Just dropping a little more pigment in here. I do want to get back up to this edge, and I'm getting a bloom, so I want to re-wet that area. So everything blends and I don't get a bloom, hopefully. And this is the deeper color with the blue. So I haven't put my veins in, so I want to make sure to get to that. Putting just a little bit of the sap green on this bottom edge. get to those veins. And I'll finish up the top of this leaf, and just always kind of correcting as I go. If I see something that needs a little cleaning up, going into some sap green here. And we can let that dry, and we'll come back and maybe do a little glazing, finish up our stems and the little branch that we have our plums on. So I wanted to show how I go ahead and lift any bits of paint that might drop onto my paper, and I just have a little toothbrush and some clean water, so you always want to get that fresh. You want to be using your paint water, and I very gently try to pull it in just one direction. And I have to say, this paper does tend to come up fairly easily, and I think that's about all I want to do on that. So I take a dry area of my paper towel and just blot it. And you know, it fades a little bit after a while. So I want to bring a little highlight to the edge of this plum. So I'm just taking some water and moving that paint around. And then I'm going to clean off my brush and see if I was able to just lift just that littlest bit to show a highlight on that edge. And you can, again, you can take your paper towel and blot that, and we'll be adding some more color in there to make that look more integrated. But let's go ahead and work on our branches now. So our branches are a variety of colors. Basically, there's some Quinacridone Gold as a base color, so I'm going to be putting some of that down. And again, I want to make sure everything stays wet while I'm working on this area. It's not a huge area, but working up to those stems, which are a yellowish green. So perhaps our green gold might be the best choice. And at this point, I'm going to take a little bit of that combination of the burnt orange, the quinacridone burnt orange, and the sepia, and just drop that in here and there. Trying to keep a little highlight at the center of our little branch here. So I'm going to clean my brush and take a damp brush, go right in along the center, maybe even up here, and just lift, just to give that sense of shape, taking a little bit more of the deeper color and just going to drop it around. I'm sure I'll be doing a little bit more glazing and showing some of these areas that are very dark and kind of gnarly. I guess that would be a good way of describing it. I'm just going to put a little teeny bit of that around the edge there. There we go. And just maybe going back in for a little bit more of that lightness. So I'm going to go up to this edge. Again, I'm using my Quinacridone Gold when I do this base color. Just blending with some water. And this is very light up here, so that will remain lighter. But then I want some of this deeper color, adding a little more sepia. I might just take that and drop it in here now while this is wet. It's a little bit of a dark line down the center here of the bark. But now I'm just going to use some of my burnt orange. And again, you know, some of this detail will require a little bit of glazing. I'm just going to take some water here. Just again to integrate those colors in my branches. Now I'm going to get a little more color on my branch, although I only got a little piece right in here. I'll probably be using a little bit of a drier brush to, you know, bring that detail in later on top. But I just want to always mention that I'm not going for realism here. I'm just trying to make something that looks good and is intriguing. So I will get a little more of the darker color and just drop it around the edge of that. Now the stems are a little more of a yellow green, so maybe just the green gold might be enough for that. I'm taking my #1 brush, so I'm going to get some more of that green gold here in my little palette that I have off to the side. So I'll drop some of this in, but I see, you know, some areas are a little warmer and a little lighter, so I'm dropping a little bit of water in there. I'm going to take just the tiniest bit of my orange and put it up here at the edge of my branch, which I see I need to bring my branch color down just a little bit more. And then that just gives it a little more interest. I'm going to drop just a little bit of the green gold in the center here. Again, I'm always wanting to blend those as best I can. Now we can move over to this stem here. And again, I'll take just a little teeny bit of the orange and just drop it at the top edge here. And then I'm lifting a little bit. I'll just continue, just moving around. Now when we get to the leaves, we can bring that color all the way down that vein, just with a very light touch. And again, I'm going to just get a little bit of the orange, drop it in here. And back to the green gold. It's a little bit darker right up here. So that's some of the sap green. I feel I could put just a little bit more green in here. And again, I'll just soften that in. It's just a little shadow, so I can do that on this one as well. Putting a little more of my orange in here. And I do want to get that little bit of the branch in here that I overlooked. And back over here. Again, I can just take that color right down the center of the leaf. I can go ahead and just do the rest of these as well. Whoops. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the rest of these as well. This one looks a little more yellow. I'm going to drop a little yellow in there, but then also a little of the orange. And some of the orange here, and in this one as well. But I'm softening that in. And I'll go over to this side, and I'm taking that green gold down the vein of this leaf. And there's my little bit of orange here at the base. And back to the green gold to get this one. And here's one more. And wait, one more. So I do want to bring a little more color into my fruit as well, and also they need those little center lines. So I'm going to take some of my rose madder, and I'm going to just draw that line in here. But then I'm going to just take a little water to soften that. And at the bottom, I'm going to be going back to my number 8. I'm going to be going into the darker mixture that I have of the Magenta and Alizarin. And just coming in here, I'm doing just a little bit of glazing. So glazing is painting wet paint over completely dry paint. So it has to be dry, but we will be blending that in. This comes all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and bring a little bit more of that up in here. So I have just a damp brush now. So I can soften that paint there, and I also want to get back over here before this dries. And soften that in. And I could have just a little bit at the top as well. So this is a little of the rose madder. I'm just going to bring that in here. And maybe just drop a little tiny bit, just charging in some of that deeper color. And then I will take some water. And work all that together. That looks pretty good. Now we can move over to this one. Again, I'm taking that deeper color, and I put that little highlight in. So I just want a little teeny bit of a highlight to show on that edge. I'm going to bring in this deeper color and kind of work my way towards the bottom with it. And it's very dark at the base of this plum, so getting a lot of pigment here and pulling that up. And I'm going to again put that little vein in. This is the rose madder. I'm just softening and kind of lifting a little at the same time. I think I'm going to lift just a little at the bottom here if I can get that up. And of course now I want to work this color around. So I need a little more of my orange right in here. Trying to avoid those hard edges. And just a little V at the top there. And then we'll get our deep, deep color. And this has just a little line down the center. Go back to my rose madder. Maybe a little bit more of the orange in here. Dropping some yellow and orange in here. And I might do the same on this side of this one, see what happens if we get a little texture. It's already pretty dry, so it might not do much of anything, so I'm dropping a little water in as well. If you feel you need a little more definition in your leaves, I'm going to take a combo of my sap and my dark mixture and just take that in towards this center vein here. And then I'm going to just soften that in. I did feel this turned out a little too blue, so I'm going to see if I can soften that into my leaf and maybe bring a little sap to that, a little sap green. That's nice. See how that works. So you can see if you paint over those veins that we made with the stick, they are there permanently. So you want to be careful with that. And to blend this, I'm going to take a little bit more of my green gold as well. Kind of glazing over all of this side of this leaf here. And I might do it just a little bit of lifting. So I do want to be careful. I do have a hard edge. And so I'm going to try and soften that. And then I can always drop a little more color in there to integrate it a little bit better. Oh. We need just a little more detail in our bark, so I'm taking some sepia, mixing it in here with just a little bit of the burnt orange, but I want it to be a little bit drier application this time because I'm just going to be making some marks just to give it a little interest and some shape. As I say, this is pretty gnarly bark here. And I will take a little water just to the sides here. And this is actually fairly dark up this way as well. And I feel like that's enough to give us that indication. Now we can decide if we need a little more color on our stems. This one seems to have a little bit deeper color, so I'm putting some of my sap and I'm grabbing a little of the orange here. And I'll just take a damp brush and move that. Just a little more detail on our stems. I think I'll make this just a little more orange towards the base and take a little of my sap and bring that in here, but I do want to integrate that as well. And I think, there's a little end to that stem that I'm going to just put a little mixture of my orange and some of my darker color, my burnt orange. So orange and burnt orange. And I think I need a little bit of green right here, softened in. And back here, let's kind of separate these a little. And let's do a little orange in that as well. And I lost that little highlight I lifted, so just seeing if I can get just the slightest lighter color there. So I do want to take my larger brush and I want to soften around these highlights a little. So I'm just taking some water and on a damp brush and just seeing if I can make these a little bit softer. So it's the same principle of lifting that paint. So I do want to blot that as well. And I'll try this one. I think that's working to just take off a little of that hard edge. And I'm feeling that my plums need a little bit deeper color in just a few places, so I'm mixing a little Winsor violet into my deeper color, that alizarin magenta with some Winsor violet, which is a very deep color. So I just want to bring just a slight bit to a few areas here. So I'm just putting that down. I'm going to just soften that in. This will just give our plums a little more shape and depth. And again, it's a little darker down the bottom here. And I'm leaving a little space there. And again, just some water to soften that in. And I may want to just bring it up here the slightest bit. And I think right on this edge is a little shadow. Also just drop in a little more color. Now this one is not quite as deep, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the alizarin for this one in that same magenta and Winsor violet. So this just has a couple little places. So we can put that down, making sure that it doesn't dry before we get back to it. Just taking some water and softening those in. Go. And we'll move over to this last one. And it's a fairly deep color as well, especially on this top edge here. And around this as well, this bottom. There's my water to blend, and I have a few little extra things in there I don't want. I'm going to take a little more of my orange here. And I want to have a little better access, so I'm going to turn this. I want to bring a little more yellow into this area of this plum. A combination of the yellow and orange. But I don't want to lose my highlight, so I'll pick that up. And I'm going to go back in on this leaf here. I feel like it needs a little more shape, so this is kind of a combination of that deep color and some sap. And then I'll just water that to the tip here and down to the bottom. And I think I'll do that on the other side as well. But just a little, I don't need too much. Just one more spot here I'd like to beef up, shall we say. I need a little more blue. Just like to bring a little more, sort of a feeling of a shadow behind this plum on this leaf. And I'll grab the Sap Green. Little green gold. Get my paper this way. And I think we're finished. I think that was just a fun exercise in getting some quick color down and making an interesting composition. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed some of the watercolor tips I shared with you in this video today. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I have other videos you might like to watch as well. And anything you'd like to see me paint in the future, please leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate you being here. Take care.